makes you feel like you're 3 foot tall. When it's just you, well, times can be tough. When there's no one there to catch or fall. 3 foot tall. Like you're 3 foot tall. 3 foot tall.
Alright guys, quick disclaimer before the video starts. This turned out a lot longer than expected, but there were a lot of sites to test, a lot of data to go through, and I also gave my opinion in between testing each site, and that is just opinion. So if your opinion is different than mine, please comment below on the sites that you like to use and why. But at the end of the video, I'll do a quick overview of the data, and that's about it. Let's get into it. What's up guys, and today we are going to cover the highly requested topic of optics in the game, and we're going to do some side-by-side comparisons, as I always do, as well as give my personal opinion and my personal feedback on some of these optics. I'm not going to go through all the iron sights on every gun just because that's going to take a lot of time. There's a lot of guns, but we will go through all the additional optics that we can. And basically what we want to do is look into aim down sights time, and I'm going to give you my personal opinion on how the sights work, how they function, pros and cons to every sight. Alright, so first off, let's get into it and let's talk about a mechanic that I want to explain, and that's going to be the Hipfire versus ADS aiming. In this game, if you Hipfire, your recoil control is a little bit harder. Your gun is pretty erratic. If you ADS, it tightens up and it becomes a lot more controllable. And this is without a foregrip or any attachments, and that was just kind of a random spray, but we can get it a lot better. But this was just for comparative purposes, so you can see the two spray patterns. Now, the way this mechanic works is as soon as you right click, the game considers you aim down sights. So you don't necessarily need to wait for that sight picture. Like, you can see that there's a slight time difference where my gun comes up and into vision and there's like a motion blur before I get that clear sight picture. I do not have to wait for my target to be in a clear sight picture before I start shooting. I can simply just be like walking through here and then all of a sudden see him and just, and like that's more than enough to kill an enemy. You don't have to wait for that sight picture as long as you know where the center of your screen is. Alright, so that's the basics of that mechanic, but still people want to know how long it takes to get aim down sights in a clear sight picture, so I want to give you that information as well. So first up is the standard MK14. This is no attachments. I have an empty loadout other than my gun. I have no extra weight. So this is basically what our iron sights, aim down sights looks like, and the reaction time to aim down sights. Hopefully you can hear my mouse click in the microphone. If not, you can just watch as soon as my gun starts moving. Basically, I've began to aim down sights. Alright, so now as far as opinions go on this sight picture, the sight picture is clear. It's a good sight. The only downside is, and this is with pretty much every gun, the left and right is obstructed by the knobs for the adjustment on windage and height, and also your hand is a little bit in the sight picture without a foregrip. If you have a foregrip, your hand moves forward and you don't see your hand, so now you have sight picture to your bottom left. The gun does block your view a little bit, but it's not too bad. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the iron sights. We're going to go ahead and change our loadout and try the next sight. Alright, so this is our EOTech, our holographic. I have this exact sight in real life on a gun, on an AR platform. And I will just tell you from personal experience what my thoughts are on this sight in-game, and it actually translates pretty well into real life. So we're going to go ahead and get the timing here. Alright, so now you can see my hand is less obstructed by the view, but that is not because my hand placement is different. It's because the housing on this sight is so big, it really blocks your view left and right. You do not have clear sight picture to your direct right and left, so if you're entering a doorway and there's an enemy to your right view right here, just right there, I cannot see him. He is blocked by my sight picture, or by my sight housing, so you cannot see your enemy there. The other bad thing about this sight is in real life, those up and down arrows on this sight control brightness. I don't have any control of that in this game, and so you get an image burn or a flare off the lens. So in certain areas, it gives you like a fuzzy picture. I don't know if you can tell it here, but you'll understand what I mean if you play with the sight a little bit. The ring is a little bit blurred. If you could turn down the brightness on this sight, it would take away the blurriness and it would give you a little bit of opacity to see through the ring, which would mean that it wouldn't block your sight picture. Once again, if there's an enemy peeking that doorway and I'm looking right here instead of over here, I may not see his shoulder before he sees me. So again, that is a downside of this sight. Other than that, I like that it has a smaller dot and not a big dot in the center, so that doesn't obstruct your view too much. As soon as their head disappears, that's a headshot, right? So you can kind of get a good sight picture as far as that goes. But that's basically it for this sight. We're going to load out with the next one. Alright guys, this is the 1x red dot. This is my personal favorite. I do have some drawbacks for it though. But let's go ahead and get the timing for aim down sights. Alright, so the drawbacks to this one are the same as the EOTech Holographic. As you can see, I have this big knob on the right and the left, and then the top. So I have an obstructed view to my bottom right, my direct right, and the top. And the housing is also kind of big and clunky, so that takes up, you know, if I'm looking through this doorway, once again, if I look dead center doorway, which you should probably never do unless you're looking down a street or something, but if I am doing that, I have lost sight of the edges of any enemies who might peek me from the doorways. So this does have its drawbacks, but what I personally like about this sight is that the red dot is not super bright. So that does have its downsides. If I look up into the sky, it disappears. So in a really bright situation, you might not see it. Like this, for instance, right now, you can barely see it. But I have a pretty good idea of where the center of my screen is. It's not a big deal to me. So if this is a problem for you, the holographic is probably better because of that big ring. You'll have a clear sight picture of the center. So the other downside is this, is if you get into a dark room, I don't know if I can find a dark enough corner, you can actually see two other lines above and below. And when you're focused in the game, it doesn't really matter, but it is always something that has bothered me personally. When I'm like sitting there, I can see those two red lines. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's going to get removed at some point, but I definitely see those. I don't know if that's just like two dead pixels or if it's supposed to be in the sight picture. I have no idea. I do not have this sight in real life, so I can't give you my personal feedback. Alright, so that's it for the 1X's. We'll go on to the next one. Alright, so this is the 2x holographic. Let's go ahead and get our timings with this one. Alright, so as you can see, the drawback for this is already very prevalent. If I'm even walking into this room, not even aiming down sights, I cannot see anything to my right. Everything is completely obstructed. So that is the big drawback here, is this is not a good CQB sight. Obviously, if there's an enemy and you have a harder time finding center screen, if he's close by and he's kind of moving around, he's going to be harder to track for you because you have the 2x. Other than that, it's basically the same drawbacks as the regular holographic. I think the sight picture is a little more clear on the 2x. I do like it a little bit better, but at the range that I engage enemies, the 2x is not necessary for me. There's only a few times where I'm like, oh, if I would have had a 2x, I probably would have beat that guy who's halfway across the map. You know, I probably would have got that pick instead of whiff my shots. But it doesn't happen that often. A lot of times if I'm shooting at people that are that far away, I'm going to be catching them off guard or from an off angle, so that way I can just kind of line up my shots and take my time. But Other than that, that's basically it for the 2x. I don't really use this sight. I don't have a lot of opinions on it other than the fact that it's really bulky. It blocks your view from everything on the right side of your screen. And then you still have your hand in the way if you don't have that foregrip. So if you're aiming kind of up at an angle, like look, holy cow, I can't see anything through this door anymore. So if you had somebody up on a balcony and then you had somebody on your right, it does block a lot of view. So you're going to be using a lot of audio feedback, so it's not a huge deal unless everybody's just slow walking everywhere across the map. But just my personal opinion, I don't use this sight very often. I know a lot of people will use it for medium range engagements. Alright, so that's it for the 2x holo. We'll go to the next one. So this is the 2x red dot. We're going to go ahead and get some timings down for this. Alright, so as far as this sight goes, it's basically the same as the 1x. You still have the annoying 2 red dots above and below the center dot. But I do think that this is a little bit less obstructive than the holographic. Maybe it's just personal opinion because I like the red dot. Maybe it's not really any less obstructive. There's still a lot of obstruction, but your view, I feel like you can see around the sight a little bit better. And as far as aiming down sights, the obstruction is pretty good. I would say it's even better than the 1x because you don't have all the housing in the way. The zoom is just so far in now that you can't really track your opponents, but that's with any type of zoom. You have a hard time tracking close range opponents. So once again, this is probably my favorite mid-range optic if I needed one. I would use this over the holographic, but I think it's still personal preference. So that's it for the 2x red dot. We're going to go ahead to the next ones. Alright, so this is the C79 4x. We're just going to get some timings here. Alright, and then as far as sight picture goes or your obstruction, there's definitely an obstruction, of course. It's a pretty big scope, but it's not too bad. You know, if I enter this doorway, I can see fairly well to my right. You know, there's a small gap between the gun and the scope, so if there was an enemy sitting right there in my hard right, hopefully I could see them. Now your only problem would be is if you had your gun kind of at that angle and they were in that corner, you're going to see a glimpse of them, but it's going to be harder to see. Once again, tracking with a 4x scope, if they're close range, like right here in my face, if they just move a little bit, it's a little bit harder to track, but not too bad. 4x is pretty manageable. Sight picture. If you're okay with the single bar arrow, you know, it's not too bad. It's pretty clear. That little bar can block a little bit of your view, but it's small enough that I don't think it'll be an issue unless somebody just quick peeks from a crouch position and you're looking a little bit high, but odds are you're going to see them regardless. So pretty good aim down sights picture and pretty good reticle. Alright, so we're going to go the next 4x. Alright, so this is the SU-230. We're going to get some timings on this one. Alright, so this is more of your marksman style scope. It does have a little bit of an obstruction with the windage control knob here on the left. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. It does block a little bit more view than the other one, I believe. As far as the reticle goes, this is more of a precise reticle. A lot of the marks don't matter in this game because until you get out to over 100 meters, we don't have any projectile physics. It's all hit scan. So unless you're doing long range engagements, which you might be with the 4x, your marks, your distance marks don't really matter. But it does give you that precision dot. I like that a little bit more than the other 4x. It's a clear sight picture. The only thing is if you're looking in a dark corner like this, you might lose it a little bit. However, the bars left and right extend out far enough that as long as you're not looking into a really big dark area, you're going to have a general idea of where your reticle is. So not too bad there. I think that's it for the 4x. Alright, so I'm going to have to do a little weapon swapping here to get the other sights. But this is the flip-up sights for your assault rifles. And I think they're available on the MP7 as well. These are just basically a modified iron sight or an upgraded iron sight, but you can see that the obstruction above the barrel, just above, is still there. However, there's not much of an obstruction while not aiming down sights other than the standard gun obstruction, so gives you pretty good clear vision of everything. Pretty good close quarters combat sight. If you do not like the standard iron sights, these are a good option for a substitute sight. It's still an iron sight, right? It's just a flip up iron sight. Alright, so that's it for this sight. We will go on to the next. I think there's only a couple other variables of scopes that we haven't done for specific guns. Alright, so this is the G36K 4x ISM scope. This is basically a 4x built into a grab handle. Alright, so this is somewhat of a precision scope, but it's still kind of a assault rifle scope for medium range engagements. It has a fairly low profile, which is nice. So you still have a clear sight picture of corners and things like that when you're entering rooms. And it has kind of a ordinary reticle, but it does give you a fairly precise spot on which to aim for center mass or headshots or anything like that. It is a little bit bulky for my liking as far as the reticle goes. I do prefer the thinner bars going across the middle of the reticle, but that is it for the ISM 4x. And the last one here is on the L85. This is the 4x Suset, and it's only available on this gun. And it looks kind of like an old school Car 98 scope from like Day of Defeat or something like that. Like a World War II reticle with the two bars coming up to a point. It's not very bulky, so that's nice. You can definitely enter rooms and not have to worry about having a blocked or impaired vision from your sight. But the reticle is somewhat to be desired if you aren't a big fan of this type of reticle. It will give you a precise shot though because of that small point that's coming up, so you can absolutely take, you know, somewhat precision shots at medium range with this. Alright, so that is it for the 4x, and I think that's really it for all the security side reticles. Alright, so the last test here I want to do is going to do with weight and stamina. So I'm going to go ahead and aim down sights here and just get a timing again. And this is a standard Mark 14, no attachments, and I have no loadout other than the gun. So that's how fast I can aim down sights with no weight, and I'm full of stamina, fully rested. So I'm going to go ahead and sprint around and lose some stamina, and then we're going to aim down sights. So I'm going to go ahead and run up here, stop, and aim down sight. Alright, so that is without stamina. We'll see if there's a difference in there when I get the timers up on the screen. And now I'm going to add weight and do the same thing. Alright, so this is 75% weight. We're going to do this rested. And then we're going to do a short run. Our guy's out of breath after a couple laps. Alright, so that's it as far as the tests go. I'm going to get the timers up and I'm going to show all the breakdowns of the aim down sights times. Alright, I don't have to say too much here. The data kind of speaks for itself. I will say that there has to be an account of human error of some sort in these numbers, just because of frame rates, the way I sync the stopwatch and the timer and all that stuff. So leave a margin of error in the times, and I would say that they're all pretty much the same. I would say that the heavyweight out of breath and the heavyweight standing test are fairly accurate because they were tested twice and they got the same result. However, the time difference between the ADS speed is very minimal, whether it's heavyweight or not. So I believe that my second test on my iron sights was the most accurate, just because I developed a pattern of going through all the sights and starting and stopping my timer. So I kind of developed a start and stop point on the frames of which I was using, and it got more consistent, I believe. So I think my second test on the iron sights is more accurate, and so if we use that time of 0.23 and then you use the heavyweight time of 0.263, it's 0.03 of a second. That's nothing. If you want to know how much 0.03 of a second is, go to your stopwatch on your phone and do this little challenge of trying to stop your stopwatch at 0.03 and then just reset it and try to do it multiple times. You will see how fast 0.03 of a second really comes. There's really not a noticeable difference there. It's slight, but I don't think it's enough for anybody to worry about. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.